Okay, this is going to be a video about how to get retro gaming working on an Amazon Fire Stick. The Amazon Fire Stick is a pretty low cost device. You can see in the background it's booting up here, just going into the standard background that the Amazon interface gives you, all the options there. And if you haven't seen an Amazon Fire Stick, I'll video it in a second, but it's basically a small USB style dongle with an HDMI connection at the end. You just put it in the back of the telly and it gives you access to Amazon's tools. Now I've modified this one slightly, putting some extra tools on, and it's booted into this screen. Now admittedly this screen here looks pretty bad, but you'll see what happens and why it's got here and how I've done it, because you can do it in different ways so you don't necessarily get this screen, but this is basically booted straight up into an app that's on Android, because the Fire Stick runs on Android, called Gamesome, and it's like a nice graphical interface for playing retro games. It's using RetroArch in the back end that you'll see in a minute, but this is Gamesome that's prompting this, and the reason the errors come up is just because it can't see a Play Store or a store where it can check to see if it's bought or if you've paid for the adverts to get removed. Because I can't do that on an Amazon Fire Stick, I'll just get a few adverts, but it's not really a problem. Anyway, so what I'll do is show you how it works. Now if I fire up my controller, which is Bluetooth, I'll just turn it on now and see how long it takes to pair. Okay, that's paired, or connected rather. You can see in the corner there it says device connected, and I should be able to go OK. And then I've tweaked a couple of the systems so less show up than normal, but here you've got the Mega Drive, and in the Mega Drive we can give Sonic a go. Again, this is all on the Fire Stick. It's big capacity, which leaves about something like, maybe 5.5 gig for files after you've done everything that you need to. You've got the other files on there. Here we go, Sonic. You can see on the edges there it's got slightly curved edges because of the filter I'm using here, and also it's got a bit of a scanline effect, so it's a shader that RetroArch is using, and I can show how to configure that. But as you can see, it's pretty quick and easy to get into a game, and if I press start playing it. It runs really well, there's no real speed issues. I mean, obviously it's not a particularly stressful emulator to run. It's just the standard RetroArch, and it doesn't need all that much in terms of resources, so it's great for playing old 8-bit, 16-bit computer games or console games. Okay. And because it's RetroArch, all of the standard hotkeys would work, so I can restart this game with select and B. There we go. And I can also get into the menu with select and X. I've mapped it to there, so probably familiar with the RetroArch based menu. And separately, when you're in the game, if you want to quit, go back to that Gamesome interface, hold down select, tap start. And the advantage with the Amazon Fire Stick is it's so portable. It's really small, yet it can still do anything that another Android system can do, really. You'd probably find if you had an Amazon Fire TV box, the sort of much larger set-top box, it's got a much more processing power, so it might play some games better, particularly maybe N64 games or PlayStation games. But for portability, it's great. I could fire another one up if, there we go. I think, largely speaking, the Gamesome app is probably geared, and quite a lot of Android apps are geared for touchscreen interface, but it works fine where you've got the Amazon Fire TV as well. You can see the scan lines quite clearly on something like this, but you could use overlays or anything else RetroArch supports as well. You can even change the aspect resolution, because mine's not really tweaked at all, so for the purists out there it's not quite right, but you can change that. But as you can see, easy to play, very playable. Right, quit that. And we can go back and choose a different system. So I could go to, let's have a look, where's my cursor? You do lose the cursor sometimes in this. You think, where's that set? Because it doesn't really show. Like I say, it's probably more geared for a touch-based interface. Okay, so in the Super Nintendo, got Super Mario World. Again, I've applied the same shape come into effect here. And there's Super Mario World. And there's no reason why you couldn't hook this into something like the Retro Achievements that I did last week, where you can just link RetroArch to save and record your achievements on the retroachievements.org website. But in principle, it's the same process. And that's it. It's that easy to get up and running. Again, if I quit out of this, and if I go back again and back out of Gamesome, it goes back into the interface for Amazon TV. And what I'll do, the way you can get back into a custom interface in two ways, but I'm just going to press the home button on the Amazon remote that it comes with, and that's where the sort of FireStarter, the custom interface, can trap that button press there and send you back. So in this is where it would normally boot to, and you can see I can go back to the Amazon Fire section by clicking that, or I can just see the settings by going into there. But I've limited, the apps that show, because I don't want to use a lot of those other ones. But if I need to, I can just go back here and access those anyway. So it's still pretty easy. Back there, I've got RetroArch installed. I've got GameSim. That was the interface we just saw. And you can even have Kodi or anything else really that's on Android. And if we go over here, quickly look down the menus of FireStarter, because you can see in the top left this FireStarter interface. If I go down to System, what we're looking for, it's not System. Updates, it'll auto update the FireStarter and Kodi if you want, but under Settings there's a few useful options, like you've got a background for those apps that were on the background a minute ago. So if you've got a custom wallpaper you put up, it will put a little colour behind the wording so you can see it more clearly. And you've got options like select the first icon, show system apps, so I could show some extra apps in this interface there. Hidden apps, if I go in there I can say, well, I don't want to hide these, I want to show these ones. So at the moment I'm just hiding BBC iPlayer in this interface, but if I downloaded more and didn't want to show them, you could just go in here to hide it, tidy it up. And another useful option is startup application, so when it starts up you can go straight into one. So in here, that's why I've got GameSim, and that's why when it started up, it went straight to that error screen. I could just say, go straight to FireStarter, and then I could manually choose GameSim, which might be a bit, you might prefer that, but you can see the option. You can just choose what you want it to automatically fire up with. And you can just have a look down the other options. There's not too many. There's about 12 or so down there, but it already helps to give a better interface. And you don't have to use that if you don't want. You could go back to Amazon Fire, and if you just keep this interface, the way you'd run it is go down to, because I don't think you can get these particular apps to go into this apps interface here, because you're not buying it from the Amazon App Store, you can access them under Settings. And under Settings you've got Applications, and under Applications you've got Managed Installed Applications. You can see it's already a bit of hassle, and then down here I could find GameSim, for example, and I could launch application from here. But that's a lot more faff than just using something like FireStarter to give yourself a bit more of a custom interface. Go back here, and if I want to play a game, back here, get past that. By the way, this is GameSim, which is the last version of its original series, so it's 1.12 B63. You can see in the top left corner the version, but they're just bringing out a version 2 beta, which has got a lot of enhancements, but I did find, for whatever reason, a bit more fiddly to configure it. This one just works straight away. I didn't have any issues with it at all, so for the purposes of the demo I'm using this 1.12, but feel free to install version 2 beta instead. It is, from what I saw, it is really good. Okay, but you get the idea. I can just go in here and start a game. I'm in the RetroArch interface, so anything possible in RetroArch you can do, and you've got a portable gaming solution. And what I'll do next is show you exactly the components that I'm using here and the hardware that you need, which isn't very much. Okay, here's the hardware used for the Amazon Fire Stick. This is the Fire Stick itself. It's pretty small, you can see it's fairly basic. All it's got really is an HDMI connector. There's no other inputs at all other than power on the side. That's a micro USB. You can't put anything else other than power in there. So that's the only connections it's got on that. As you can see, really portable, about 8 gig of storage, and you can put pretty much any Android based application on there and it'll happily run. So the other cables that it comes with is this one to give it a bit of an extension. You can put it in there and then you've got a bit more flexibility in case that you can't get that in your TV directly. Maybe it's too close to the wall or something like that, so you do get an adapter, but it's optional. So besides that, one option you've got is this cable here, which is power. So you can put that power in and then use a USB on, say, your TV. So your TV could power it. You wouldn't need a mains adapter. It does come with a mains adapter like this, and at the end of it you've got the power as normal. So you can just put that in, and it's just a USB connection here. So you could put that USB connection in your TV as well, but obviously it's a much longer cable, and the shorter one could be more practical. This long one comes with it, and the shorter one you can buy separately for a couple of pounds or so. But that's the controller, that's the power adapter that you can use to power it if your TV won't support that. And then separately, besides the actual Amazon Fire Stick itself, and because there's no other inputs, if you've got a controller, it needs to be Bluetooth, because it will support Bluetooth. It's got Bluetooth built in, and it's also got Wi-Fi built in, because clearly it needs to get data in somehow. So inside there is a Wi-Fi adapter. And then I'm going to use an 8-bit Do controller. It's pretty good for retro games as well as navigating the menus. And the mode that I pair it in is the normal joypad mode, which is set by just holding down power there. And as soon as it comes on, you let go, and it's just that pattern of one flash, sort of 1 and 1, as opposed to the arcade mode or any other mode that you can set when you turn it on. So that's the one I'm going to use, and you'll find that it will reconnect once paired pretty easily, as long as you just turn it back on in the same mode, and it'll reconnect really quickly within a few seconds back to the Amazon Fire once it's booted up. So that's the controller I'm using. I've also tried another controller, an SFC30 by 8-bit Do, which I think I've got actually. That's this one. And whilst it does pair perfectly well and connect, I've had a lot of trouble reconnecting to it. So when it restarts, when it reboots, it really doesn't seem to want to reconnect very reliably. So I've had more problems with this one. But it may work, or maybe it doesn't. But this one definitely does, no problems at all. And that's what I'll be using in the demo. Nearly forgot, this is the Amazon Fire remote that comes with it as well. So as you can see, pretty simple design, batteries at the back, and just 6 buttons, as well as the directional pad there and the select button here. You've got the home button, which is quite useful to get back to the interface menu, or you've got back here, menu here, and then fast forward, rewind and play here. So standard remote, it's really responsive, it's really useful. But for retro gaming, obviously you're better off with a controller. And as the controllers, this is also a Bluetooth device. Okay, here we are in the Amazon Fire Stick interface, and this is the completely vanilla boot up. I've factory reset the device, so it's just as you'd get it if you buy one new. The only thing I've done is on the startup it prompted me for my Amazon account detail and Wi-Fi password, but that's it. This is where it'll take you. So you'll get your remote control and you can just navigate this as normal. The main area really that you want to check out is all of the options that you'll be interested in. So you've got parental controls, don't need that. Controllers and Bluetooth, which is where we'll set up the controller in a minute, the FC30 Pro, which I find pretty reliable with this. We've got applications. If we go in applications, I turn this off, collect app usage data, don't really need that one. Turn it off. Okay. And if we look at the settings, system settings, developer options, we want ADB debugging on and apps from unknown to be, because we're going to effectively side load a couple of apps. Side loading is when you just download an application, not on the stick or the device directly, but you get it on your computer and copy it across manually. So that's what we're doing. We don't need to root the device. You don't need to get sort of unauthorized access, if you like. So it's all within the warranty, I suppose. Like I say, no rooting needed. Just sideload a couple of apps. Okay, so hit OK there, and we've got the developer options on now. Now, if I go to the About option, you can see here you've got the storage option, which says about 5 gig free. So I haven't installed anything, and the 8 gig internal memory is reporting that it's got 5.5. I guess there's a bit of overhead there and inbuilt files that you can't remove anyway. But the upshot is you get about 5 gig to play with, which in terms of retro gaming is a lot. Just broadly speaking, all of the Mega Drives would probably take about a gig of space, and all of the SNES about a gig. The NES probably take about, I don't know, 300 meg, or the Game Boy about 300 meg. So you get loads of systems on this. You might struggle a bit with a PlayStation game, but then the processor would probably struggle a bit on this. You've got arcade games that might struggle a bit, although a lot are quite small as well. So basically, you should have enough room to get at least the games you like. And it's also a good excuse not to put thousands of games on and try and pick and choose ones that you actually like or the ones you'd play. Okay, so we've got network, which you do want to take a note of this down, because it's going to be useful when you use FTP in a minute. And for example, my IP address is 192.168.0.16, and yours will be different probably. So note that one down. Controllers, the only controller I've got connected at the moment is the remote that came with it, so it can't see anything else yet. And then you could always check for a system update, but I'm not sure there has been one, but either way you can update there if you need to. Okay, so let's take a look at the installed applications under here. Manage installed applications, and this is where you'll see all of the applications. Some of these, if you download them using the Amazon App Store, would probably appear in the normal app menu on the left, but if you sideload ones they probably won't, so you could run them from here. But it's an important area to know that you can get to if you really want to run some of those other apps, especially if you don't use that FireStarter interface. Okay, under here, what else we got? Settings. Yeah, by default there's hardly anything there at all, but we'll be putting more stuff here. Now, next thing we'll do really is just get the controller working. You can do that under controller and Bluetooth devices. It's really easy to add Bluetooth controllers. I have found a bit of a problem with the SFC30 Pro from 8BitDo, and maybe you'll find some separate Bluetooth controllers have the same issue. And although it connects fine, it won't automatically reconnect when you reboot the Fire Stick, or when you've turned it off and you need to turn it back on. It doesn't automatically reconnect. It will if you go back into the whole repairing process, but you don't really want to have to do that every time. So I found the FC30 Pro doesn't seem to have an issue, and Amazon also have got their own gaming controller, which is about £35 or so. So it's not cheap, but no doubt that would work pretty well. But I imagine it would work with most Bluetooth controllers, but I just found that the FC30 Pro works pretty well, and it's a great retro gaming Bluetooth controller. Obviously you do need it to be Bluetooth. You can't use a USB cable or other method. Okay, so we go in here and we want the Bluetooth game controller, and I'll just get the controller there. Now just tap it on so it's got that single flash mode. And the first thing I'm going to do is just lose all its previous pairing. So I hold down that pair button. So that should have wiped it, just to get it a bit more reliable to reconnect. Anyway, let's add Bluetooth controllers. So it should be scanning for this. Hopefully it shouldn't be too problematic. I've had a couple of times when it won't do it first time, but after a while it does seem to do it fine, especially if you wipe the previous pairing from it. Okay, there we go, it's found that. Now if I say connect to that, and I'll just watch, it's still flashing the controller, I'll just watch it and hopefully it will pair. And this is where I do get the problem sometimes. So it might not play ball this time. If it doesn't, I'll try wiping the pairing detail again. It is still flashing, so I would have expected to see it connect by now. Okay, I've just restarted because I was having trouble connecting that, and I think a reboot actually makes the pairing process a bit smoother. So I'll try it now and hopefully it should pair without an issue. Okay, so controllers and Bluetooth. Bluetooth game controllers and add Bluetooth. Now I'll turn that controller back on. Okay, so it's flashing now. So hopefully the Amazon process should see that to pair with. Okay, it's seen that, hit OK. Pairing the controller, and it's done it. So that didn't take very long at all, and I think really the only key difference I did that time to make it work better was rebooting it. So once you've got in there for the first time and you want to restart your connect your controller, give it a reboot, and that's connected now, and I'll find that it often reconnects perfectly, no problems at all. I think I've read that the Amazon Fire Stick will look for a previously paired device to connect to when it starts up for about 5 minutes. So if you're using your Fire Stick for more than 5 minutes and then decide to pair your Bluetooth controller, it may not pair, so try to do it a bit earlier rather than later. Anyway, so that's paired absolutely fine. I should find I can control the interface now with my joypad. Yeah, that's going fine. So it's often a bit easier and quicker to use a joypad to navigate rather than the remote control, but you can use either, both work at the same time. Okay, so next thing we want to do is get a file explorer program, and we need a file explorer so we can sideload the apps and run them. And the one we want to do that is ES File Explorer. It's really popular and it should just be in this apps section. So if I go into apps and choose top free, because I think it's a really popular free one, and scroll, there we go, ES File Explorer, that's the one we want. So I'll choose that and say download. It shouldn't take very long, it's pretty small. Okay, so it's finished downloading, just installing it, and then we should be able to access this within the main interface because it's from the Amazon store anyway, so there's no real issue. Okay, so it's finished and I've got an open option, so I'll choose open. Okay, so it says adjust your display for the best full screen experience on your telly. So I'll do this. Now it's not going to be, you'll do this for your own TV, so just okay, up and down to adjust the display. Okay, this is ES File Explorer. Again, I don't think it's the easiest program to navigate with. Sometimes it loses the focus on the button you're selecting, but you don't need to do an awful lot with it, and I'll show you the main bits that you need. So if you go down, at the moment you're on the left hand menu, and what I want to do is, I just collapse that tools menu there, don't need that. I want the network option, and under network I tend to use the remote manager. I find that easiest to do what we need. So under remote manager, I could just press right there to get to that turn on button. I could just select turn it on, which is fine, but I just want to tweak the settings there and say I don't want to close on exit because I want this running in the background. It's just helpful. And you could change the root directory to look at a different path to get access to more files, but you don't really need to, and we don't need access to any more. So if I just go back here and then I go turn on, and you can see here, now that's on, you've got the address there, which is 192.168.0.16, and then it's got a port number, which is 3721. So basically, write this down. Yours will be slightly different, Write that down, and we're going to put that into an FTP program. I'm going to use FileZilla, but you can use whatever you like, whether it's CyberDuck or I don't know, WSFTP. Any FTP program should do this, but you do need those details. So what I'll do now, I'll drop into the PC and fire up a FTP program, and you can see me copy some files across to the Amazon Fire Stick. And you can just keep this running as it is, or you can quit back to the main menu because it should be running in the background, but I just leave that as it is for the minute, and then get on your PC to copy some files across, and it'll use the Wi-Fi network to do that. So your PC must be on the same Wi-Fi network that your Amazon Fire Stick's on. And you can see the name just under network status of your Wi-Fi network. Okay, here we are in the PC interface, and what we're going to do is copy a couple of files across, and the ones we want are Gamesome and LibRetro and FireStarter. So Gamesome is that interface that makes the access to the games a bit prettier than just using RetroArch. So this is the website for it, gamesomeapp.com. You can read about it, particularly the version 2 public beta. I'm using the older 1.12, but you can download the 1.12 here at this link, apk-dr.com, gamesome-frontend, and all you've got to do, click download APK file, and you get the file, and you can copy that one. For LibRetro or RetroArch, we're looking for the download, which is at the top here. So libretro.com, hit downloads, and we want the Android version, and there it is. So you can get the APK there, it's 35 meg, just download that file, and that's that one. And the last one we want is FireStarter, which you can see at the GitHub address here, sphinx02/FireStarter. So you can access that. They're all free, all available easily on the internet there, and you can just download. You've got instructions about what it does, how it works, but if you're going to download it, you can choose the releases option, which is releases, there, 18 releases. Okay, so the latest one was December the 5th. There's the APK, download that, and you've got the 3 files that you're after. So then you go to your FTP program. I've got mine here, and you can see for Amazon Fire Stick, I've got the settings that we saw earlier on the screen. So I've got the IP address as 192.168.0.16, and I've put in the port 3721. You can change the port if you want on the Amazon Fire Stick, but you'd have to change it here as well. Logon type anonymous should work fine, so I'm going to hit connect there. Okay, so you can see there it's connected fine, and you've got a list of the folders, and we're going to go into the download folder. That's the one we want. So although it looks like the root here, it's not the actual root, because you saw earlier in the interface on the Fire Stick you could set the root and the root directory to go back further, but it doesn't really matter because we don't need access to those other areas. So download's where we want to go. Double click that one, and it's empty at the moment, but I'm going to copy those APKs across, which was FireStarter and Gamesome and RetroArch 1.3. And what I'll also do is copy across a custom background. It's optional, but you can make FireStarter use one of your own wallpapers. So I've got a custom one here. Okay, so drag that one across as well. So I've got all my files there that I'm after in the download area. And now we just go back to the Amazon Fire Stick, and we can copy across and install these apps or sideload them. One more area that you have to copy across as well is the ROMs that you want to play. So you can do this at any point, but it's easier if you're FTP'd at the moment anyway, just to copy them across. And you can see here you've got a list of directories in what is shown as your root directory here. We're just going to add one more called ROMs. We can call it whatever you like. It doesn't really matter as long as it's easy to find for you. And what we'll do here, I'll drag my ROMs directory across, copy it down here. You can see it's appeared here, and within ROMs I've got a Mega Drive folder and I've got a SNES folder as well. So a couple of fired up there, and I can just refer to them later on, but you can put as many games or systems as you want as long as there's enough space, and as you've seen there's about 5 gig or so in total. Now we've done that, we can go back to the other interface on the Amazon Fire Stick. Okay, I've left the Fire Stick for a while and it's kicked in with a screensaver, but if I just move a button on the joypad that we connected with Bluetooth earlier, it should get rid of that. You can see it's still on the same screen, and it's got like the connection still live there, or still able to connect remotely. I could turn it off, and I think it will time out after so long of inactivity, so then you'd have to go back here and re-enable it. But what we're going to do now is install those applications we copied across, and we're going to do that in this interface as well. So if I go up here, what I want is the local disk space. So up here under local, and we've got the download directory. You can see in the download directory now we've got those files, and the first one I'm going to install is FireStarter. Okay, choose install. It just confirms what sort of access it will have to your Fire Stick. Down the bottom there, choose install. Okay, and now we can open that. And that's the interface that you saw earlier on. That's a lot cleaner than the main Amazon Fire Stick interface. But you can use either, as I've said, but this one's quite a lot easier. Okay, and now what we're going to do is install RetroArch, and we're going to install GameSim. So if I go back into ES File Explorer here and choose RetroArch, install that. This will take slightly longer, it's a little bit bigger. But one thing it's going to do is install part of the configuration of RetroArch on an area in the Fire Stick that isn't that easy to navigate to. You might need extra permissions to get there. There we go, it's installed, so it doesn't take very long. I'll just choose done there. So what we'll do in a moment is repoint to RetroArch to say look for its configuration files in a place that's much easier to get to and manipulate. And that makes quite a bit of difference in how easy it is to get up and running, because I've just found it quite limiting trying to get access to that other area. You might even have to root the device to get to those files, but it's much easier just say instead of using that directory, move it here, and then you can configure it just like any other RetroArch install. Okay, and lastly we just need to install the GameSim front end. So install that. Install. Again, this is 1.12. You might want to try the 2 beta. It's probably got quite a few enhancements. Okay, that's done. And that's largely all you'll ever need to use that File Explorer for, unless you want to put other or sideload other apps onto it. Okay. We'll go back into that interface. If I back out of that, press again to exit. And within the FireStarter section, we can choose Settings and Wallpaper Background Image. Select Wallpaper. It says there as well, it needs to be a JPEG or PNG, and that's the size of my screen at the moment, so it's probably just telling me how big my screen is. Okay, select Wallpaper. I put it in Download, and there it is. And it's put it in the background. And other options, whilst I'm here, I'd want to do is put a background for the app names to make them stand out a little bit more. Hidden apps, I don't really need to hide any because I want to see all of these, but you could if you needed to. And I do want my startup application to be GameSim, so it fires straight into that interface where I can play the games. And that's it to get it back here. That, again, now that's looking pretty much as it was when I started up at the start of the video, how to play the games, but we've still got to do quite a bit of config with RetroArch first, and to do that it's easier going back to the FTP program we had a minute ago, and we're just going to create some directories. So I'm going to leave that one there and flip back to FTP on the PC. Okay, I managed to forget to install RetroArch, so I wasn't seeing the folders I need. So before we create those extra folders to repoint RetroArch configuration files to, we need to install it. So although it's on the Fire Stick, we need to run it for the first time for it to initialize all of its directory structure. So RetroArch, and you'll see here it should be unpacking. Yeah, it says might take a while. It doesn't take. There you go, 100% down the bottom, and that's largely it. It's must have done that in the background. That's done pretty quick. So okay, I can't use my joypad at the moment in this because the auto configuration files that it uses doesn't have my controller as one of its settings. So if your controller is already in RetroArch's configuration, you can use that immediately. Mine isn't, but the Fire Stick remote control is. So if I press down on that, there you can see it's configured. It flashed up at the bottom left there, and I can use that to exit out of here. So I'm going to quit RetroArch, and now what I'm going to do is go back to the PC and create some folders. You only have to do this once, so whilst it does seem a bit of a faff the first time, it doesn't take that long, and like I say, once it's done, you're away. Okay, here we are back in the FTP program, and I'm connected here. You can see the folder structure. Where I'm going to go is the Android folder. In Android, I'm going to go Data, and in here, if I refresh that one, there I've now got con.retroarch, so I'm going to go in there, and Files, and here is where I'm going to create those extra folders. So this bit isn't going to be very exciting, it's just going to be me creating a set of folders. So if I just run through that, feel free to skip ahead. Okay, now those are there, I'm just going to put a couple within this database folder. And I'm going to put a couple within the filters folder. And that's it. Okay, so those folders are recreated, and I'm going to reconfigure the configuration file to look at those, and I'll do that in the Amazon view. What I'm also going to do is copy across the configuration file I've got for my controller, which is this one here. And if I open that, oh, I copied that across, didn't want to do that just then. I'm going to put it in the auto config file folder, because that's where RetroArch looks for configuration information. But in a moment, I'm also going to show you how this is generated anyway. I'm just putting it there because it's going to make it easier for me to demo it. If I put that there, so it shouldn't get overwritten. Now if we view that, I will show a couple of things. If you've got the same controller, the settings, you can use these settings. You can see the details down here, but at the bottom there I've added some of the hotkeys. So to enable hotkeys, I've said it's button 4, which would map to my select button up here. Then to exit the emulator, 82, which maps to my start button. the reset button 97, which is the B button up here, and 99 to get to the RetroArch menu, which is the X button. But you can put any extra settings you want in there. It's just the RetroArch config, so the same applies. And this video is more about just getting it up and running generally rather than going too much into that RetroArch config. So you don't need to copy this file at all. It's just for me to get my controller working. You may well have a different controller, in which case it'll automatically work on its own, or it will just need setting up once, which is what I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so I've copied that file across, and now we'll go back to the Amazon Fire Stick and move the RetroArch configuration into these folders that we've just created. Okay, emergency video edit. One thing, because I've created this auto config directory and I've repointed RetroArch to now look at it, it doesn't have the config for the remote control, the Amazon remote control. So I'm going to copy it in there. If you go in auto config, and I'm going to drag Amazon Fire TV remote across, and if you need to know the contents, we can open it here, and you can see here, they're just comments, so you don't have to put those in, but enter this detail, and it'll then be able to be used. So if I close that, obviously just pause this, write it down if you want, and upload it, or try and link to a copy. Okay, so now that's that in there, we can go back to the Amazon Fire Stick, and if you need to quit out of an application where the remote control isn't working, you can just tap the home button and it kind of like force quits out of it. But anyway, we'll go back to the TV now. Okay, back in the Amazon TV Fire Stick interface, and we're going to go back into RetroArch. I'm going to use the controller to do this because I know that your controller should definitely be working, and it'd just be easier to run through that way. And if we go at the bottom there, you see I've got the home selected. If I go right and right again, you've got settings. In settings, I'm going to scroll up to loop around to the bottom of the list, go in directory, and I'm going to change these. So I'll do the first one sort of step by step, but then I'm just going to rattle through and do the rest, so you can skip to the end if you don't need to see all that. So you can see here the downloads directory is in storage emulated 0 download, which is fine. But this one here is where we're going to change it. Anything that says com.retroarch, we're going to change to the new area that we've created. I don't think by default there's one that's already there. I just checked. They're all data. There's one you don't need to change, which is looking at in a different area. Yeah, they're all data com RetroArch. So if we go for this first one, which is the assets directory, at the moment it's data com RetroArch / assets, and that's going to change to, if I choose this default folder here, so it takes me straight to that files folder that we were on, then in files I'm going to choose assets because that's what that path was. And then I've got the use this directory option at the top, select that, and that's done. Now I'm going to go back in the directory by pressing OK on directory, and you can see here the assets directory is now storage emulated 0 android data com RetroArch files assets. So I'm going to move them, all the rest of them, into the same mapping. So wallpapers. Okay, that's all of those remaps. So now we've reset all of those to look at the new directories that have been created. We're just going to change one of the settings. Obviously you can go into this and change as much as you want, but the other one that's quite useful is the change configuration per core. So if you're running a Super Nintendo game, you could get particular controls set up in a different way for that, or a different overlay or a different shader per system. And that's a quick and easy way of setting up the changes there. So if I go for configuration and configuration per core on, and go back, and what I'll do now, if I scroll to the left and then choose quit RetroArch, it should save that automatically. Okay, so let's quit out of that. Right, we're going to go back into RetroArch. Like I say, if you're stuck in there and it's not working, tap the home button. And we should find, hopefully, that, there we go, the Amazon Fire TV remote is configured because of the configuration file we put there. Now it looks slightly different because it hasn't got all the assets. So what we're going to do is run the online updater. And we're going to run down all of these, but I'm not going to do the auto config profiles. And when it says auto config profiles, it's talking about the files for a whole range of controllers. And I don't want to add loads of controllers in there because I know I've only got this remote control and a couple of other controllers, and it's just easier to see when it's just got the ones I need in it. And if it helps, I mean, you can do it and your controller might be in there and it'll just work. So it's not necessarily a bad idea, but I'm not going to do it just because I don't think it's necessary. So core updater, this would download the actual core, so the emulators if you like. And the ones I want are a Mega Drive one and a Super Nintendo one, but you could get them all, they're not that big. I'm going to find, there we go, Genesis plus GX, so that's downloaded, the Mega Drive one. And the other one is a Super Nintendo one, I think SNES 9X. There, so SNES 9X next. They're the two that I use, but yeah, you can download other ones. So back, now we're update core info files. Actually, I think that would then show, yeah, shows this in a kind of nicer way, but it doesn't really matter. Update assets, this one takes slightly longer because it's got a load of graphic files in there. And fonts I think as well, shaders, overlays, no not overlays, but it's got a lot of files in here anyway. And then it'll expand it and put it in those new folders that we created, so it's easier if you need to tweak them than that original system based folder. Although I'll have a look at the settings in a minute actually, because I think I found there was one path where it didn't seem to want to change to the new folders. It doesn't matter, it wasn't that important, but I'll run through that in a second anyway. Okay, so it's downloaded all the assets, and it's in the background expanded those. I'm not going to do the auto config. Oh, okay, you can see the screen just updated with a new font there. I'll update the cheats. I don't use them, but may as well have them. And we'll go for databases. I'm not too sure what this bit does, but I'm sure it's great. Okay, overlays. That's probably quite a few more files that you can choose from, and in a minute we'll configure one of the shaders. You could use overlays or anything else really, but one of the shaders I think works quite well. Okay, so that's the overlays done. And the shaders. Again, there's quite a few there, so there's quite a few to choose from. Although shaders, especially the more powerful ones, tend to put quite a strain on the CPU, and I don't think the Amazon Fire Stick is particularly strong in that department, so you're best off with a quite lightweight shader or just use an overlay. Or you could use neither and just use the output as it stands. Anyway, that's it. That's everything updated. And if you went to the FTP program, you'd see those folders now populated with files. But what we'll do is copy across now the specific CRT shader I'm using, because it's not included in that set, but I find it quite useful, and I couldn't copy it there before because it probably would have got overwritten by that process. So I'll jump back to the PC and copy that across now. Okay, back in the FTP program, my path is the same, Android data com RetroArch files auto config. Just go up a file. I'm going to go into the shaders, and in the shaders GLSL, and then in CRT. So you can see there's a hell of a lot of shaders to choose from there. But anyway, I'll go in the CRT folder, and I'm going to copy across the CRT-Pi, because it's geared for Raspberry Pi or maybe quite not as powerful device as a full PC. So I'll put a link to where you can find these, or you can use one of the pre-existing ones. But CRT-Pi goes into this folder here, and then in the shaders folder here, I'm going to copy this one, CRT-Pi.glsl. Okay, that's copied across there. And what I'm going to do in that file I just copied across, CRT-Pi.glsl, is just check a couple of those options in here. If I hit View Edit, you can see here there's a few settings that you can tweak, and the one that I want here is curvature. So I'm going to take the comment out on curvature, so it does have that bend. If you keep it in like this, it'll just be square, which is fine, you know, it's just a personal preference. So I'm going to take the curvature one out, and you can always change the curvature. I think you can do it here by changing the values here to make it even more sort of bent through, but I think the defaults are fine. So I've done that. I'll press save, close that, and then upload it, and that's just overwritten that. So that's all I needed to do there. And again, that's fully an optional step, the whole install a shader. You don't need to bother with that at all, but I think it makes it look better. So back to the Fire Stick. Okay, what we're going to do now is configure that Bluetooth controller. All this time it's been sitting there connected. The blue light LED has been solid on, so I know it's on. But if I press the button now, you'll probably see RetroArch say it doesn't know what it is. There we go, down the bottom. Actually, it said configured. I think it's a bit confused because I put that temporary file in there in the auto config directory earlier. But I'll show you now how to configure your controller. If you get your remote and go to settings, which I'll go this to the right to that settings section, and then scroll down here to input, and then choose input user. I'm going to do user 2 binds because user 1 is with the remote and it might get a bit confused if I try and overwrite it whilst I'm using it. But anyway, input user 2 binds, and you can see there it's got the 8-bit do. It can see it because it's connected, and if I scroll I can see the Fire Stick. If you can't see that, your controller there, just tap a button on it and it should appear, and then just find where it is in the list. It'll often be the number one controller, so it shouldn't be hard to find. Just tap a button on the controller. Now we're going to bind all, and when I press that, it's going to ask me to press all the buttons, and you get about 4 seconds to go, so just get ready to press the buttons. Okay, so I'll go through that now, and this will write the file into the auto config folder, although you remember I wrote mine earlier and added the hotkeys, so this I'm going to use that one effectively, but this is how you would create your own, and then you can always go and edit it, put your hotkeys in and anything like that. So I'll bind all now. B, Y, okay, select, start, up, down, left, right, A button, X, right, left. Okay, I definitely got some of those wrong when I did that, but it doesn't really matter. That's the principle. So now they're added. If you get the controller and choose Save Auto Config, which is here, that will have written the file, and you could start using that. So now we can just go and quit back out of that. Go here, quit RetroArch. And what I'm going to do is just in the back end, I'm going to change my auto config file so it'll work. You don't need to do this because that process you just followed will do that for you. Okay, I think the connection that I had before has just bombed out, so you can start it up again if you need in ES File Explorer. And in here we're just going to scroll down I don't need the local section. I'm going to go down to network, go to remote manager and turn on. So I've just done that because in the background I want to add that auto config file. Okay, so that's in Android data com RetroArch files auto config. Okay, like I said, you shouldn't need to do that because your creation of the auto config file should be working anyway. Okay, now I can go into RetroArch with the controller, and as soon as I press the button in RetroArch, you'll see in the bottom left it says my 8-bit DFC30 is configured. I can use that. Now if I go across to the right in settings and choose configuration, just to make things easier, I'm going to turn excuse me, the configuration per core. Rather than have it on, I'm going to leave that off just so all the systems are the same for the minute. And we're going to go down to on-screen overlay and make sure that the display overlay is off, because at the moment it's just using a RetroPad because it's an Android version of RetroArch. It thinks you're most likely to use a touch-based system. So we'll turn that off, turn off auto load and keyboard overlay, and we'll just save those settings, quit RetroArch so it's saved them, go back in, and we should be able to play a game pretty easily now. So if I go load content, select file and detect core, go to storage emulated 0 and choose my ROMs directory that we uploaded earlier, Mega Drive and Sonic. There you go, you've got Sonic loading. And that's pretty much how it was when I started the video. But what we'll do is set up the shader, and we should be able to do that if I press the hotkey to get into the RetroArch menu. That's select an X on mine, which you saw sort of earlier on. And if I choose in this menu, because the core is still loaded, I'm going to choose shader options and load shader preset, shaders GLSL, and I put it in the CRT folder, and it was CRT-pi. And if I go back here, just check if there was a apply shader changes. There we go. Okay, so that should be set fine. Now if I go back to resume content, there you can see that's applied, sort of bent the sides, and the graphics just look a lot more pleasing on a HD TV. You've got a bit of a scanline effect, and it still runs really well. Okay, now if I quit that, start select, straight out of that, I'll go into RetroArch and it should just start in with those settings. If I say load recent, play that game, run, there we go, it's remembered all the configuration. And that's pretty much all you've got to do in RetroArch, unless you want to make more RetroArch settings, which is fine. So I'll quit out of that, and now we'll get our front end working with GameSim. So I'm going to start that one up, and you get the error message that we saw earlier. Loading up for the first time, it says, do I want to download the database to perform offline scans? Well, that's fine, yeah, we can do that. And this will also sort of scrape the data as well for you, so you get the little box art pictures. By default, it'll just give you a list of the names. What we'll do at the moment is go to the settings, which you can see in the top right. Okay, and it wants to set an email address for crash reports. Okay, anonymous, fine. Right, so if I go settings, there we go. You can hide the systems here so you don't get so many showing. So hide Atari, Commodore, Dreamcast, etc. And you could run down quite a few there. Get the idea. But what we want to do is get the settings. If I scroll to the right for emulators, I'm going to set the default emulator for the Mega Drive, and I'm going to choose RetroArch Genesis plus GX because that's what I installed the core for. So that's now set, and now if I scroll to the right, I'm going to choose paths. If I choose path for the Sega Mega Drive, and down here it's in ROMs, Mega Drive, set this folder. That's done, and that's in terms of the settings, and that's mostly what you need to do. Although I think on the game browser, the game launch mode, it's worth setting. I find it's easier if you choose the quick launch mode, so you just tap a button to start a game rather than having to hold it. It works better for a joypad, I think. So that's set to quick, and that should be it. If I go back and scroll across until I see the Mega Drive option. There we go. There, Mega Drive. Okay, so it's scanning the folder, I think. It should find the files in a minute. There we go, it's showing them up. And it should also scrape that as well. There you go, I don't think you have to manually tell it. They're all appearing. Now I should be able to run those as normal. If I choose Sonic, it'll kick in with RetroArch, running as it was before. And if I quit out of this, I should go back to the GameSim interface rather than the RetroArch one. Yeah, back there. Okay, it does ask you that until you quit for the first time. It doesn't keep coming up with that. And then to quit out of this, it's B. To get back to a back menu, B again, you're out of it, and then go back into GameSim. And whilst you get that message, you shouldn't get too many other normal ones. This one doesn't keep appearing. I don't know why it is there. Okay, Mega Drive, Golden Axe. There you go. I'd say that's all there is to it. I know that was quite a hefty set of steps, but once you've done it, the principle's really easy, and then you've got Amazon Fire Stick able to play retro games. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments. I'll try to put all the useful info there in the description so you don't have to hunt around for too many files. And if you get any problems, just let me know. If you find this useful, please click the thumbs up because it does help me know if they're a useful video or not. And hopefully you'll be up and running in no time. Thanks.